Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. Ralph, we got something interesting to talk about here today, and that is this sudden news that we saw on Matt Hardy's YouTube channel, and that is he has announced that he is becoming the real Matthew Hardy. He's dropping all the gimmicks, and he's becoming himself, or at least the new character of himself, blaming the reasoning of the fact that what's happening with the pandemic, the fans cannot react to the broken gimmick. Also, the stuff that's happening in society, the split between political parties, even going to mention the suspension of Sammy Guevara, leading to his frustrations with his run currently in AEW. So, Ralph, what do you think of all this? Do you think this is just a character-driven decision, or is this a societal decision, or is this just him realizing that the character's not working and he's changing because of that?
I think the most significant thing that he's taking into consideration is the fact that there are no fans in the stands. And really, for that woken gimmick to work, I think you really need fans in the stands, and you need to appeal to the audience, and you need to have some type of reaction. I think that type of character, especially that's something that's really over the top, not only is it hard for him to go out there and try to pull that off with no audience there at all, but it's really hard to gauge if that's working. Really, the only thing you have to go by at that point is the quarterly hour ratings and people's interest on social media, whether, if there's a segment that's getting shared or talked about more versus another segment. If it includes him doing the woken gimmick, then okay, cool, maybe it's working. But it's really hard to gauge if this is working right now.
I agree. And, this is a character that a lot of people in the wrestling industry loved in Impact Wrestling. They tried it in WWE. It didn't really work out, mostly because he was on and off television for a while, and they didn't really know how to really use Matt Hardy unless Matt Hardy had full creative control of the character, which obviously it's WWE. You're never going to have full creative control. But here we are. His first day in AEW, as he mentioned, was the first empty arena show. So you have that and there's no reaction to it. Like, how are you supposed to base that off? Same with Brody Lee. Brody Lee had his debut that same night and there's nothing to react to, even though it was supposed to be set for his hometown in Rochester, New York. So I like the move here. And quite honestly, I think they can even go a bit further. And because we know that he has all these different gimmicks, he wants to be the real Matthew Hardy. Why not make it like a schizophrenic patient, where they have him doing backstage vignettes with the therapist going over the different characters that he has in his mind. And then when fans come back, he can do what he was doing before that doesn't quite work with the lack of audience.
Yeah, I think that's one way to certainly do it, especially with the split characters and the split personality, like you mentioned. I definitely think that he's going to have to wait until there is some type of audience so that way they can gauge if this is working or not. The one thing that we can confidently say is, with Matt Hardy in this specific character, gimmick, whatever you want to call it, this worked, in my opinion, to a very small percentage of the wrestling fan base, a very niche market, in a company that at the time, not many people were really paying all that much attention to, and some people may be upset about that, but that unfortunately is the truth. If you ask a majority of the wrestling fan base who Matt Hardy is, they're going to talk about the Hardy Boys. They're going to talk about his tag matches, the ladder matches, and that's how a good majority of the wrestling population, or the former wrestling population of the fans, is going to refer to Matt Hardy. So that's what he's known as. So if you are somebody who does just so happen to go and turn on AEW and you see him portraying this gimmick now after all these years, people aren't going to get it initially. You really have to build them up to that point. So I think what they kind of have to do is bring him in, as he pointed out, being the real Matt Hardy, whatever that actually means, and then slowly introduce the woken gimmick once fans start to be allowed to go back to the shows and things of that nature, and really start to gauge if people are going to accept this. Because even though WWE didn't go, full court press with this, they did give him a fair amount of airtime, and they did try to do it to a certain extent, not necessarily to the extent that TNA did it or Impact did it.
They gave him an ultimate deletion.
They did. And that's the main point. He was on TV most weeks. He did win the tag team championships alongside Bray Wyatt. So, like with anything with WWE, they don't fully take the time to understand the gimmick. They more or less just say, okay, go do this version of it. So maybe it can work on a larger scale, but I think this really only caters to a very niche market of the fan base.
Right. Now, the last episode we talked about WWE and the problems that they're having with their creative and their booking. And we brought up the relatability of characters and the relatability of certain storylines. Like certain things are just not clicking anymore. Something like Matt Hardy, the Woken character, is that something that actually is relatable? Whereas the real Matthew Hardy, whatever that is, might be relatable. And I think this is a problem with just pro wrestling today, is that while there are still your relatable characters, and AEW I think is doing better at it than WWE, I think the characters that we known and love, like in the 90s and the 2000s, you can't do anymore because they're not relatable.
Not only that, but trying to uphold the character outside of just the show itself and in the real world is much harder now than it ever was because of social media. You could just take a picture of somebody out to eat with his family and tweet it out, or put it on Instagram and put it on Facebook. So expecting somebody to uphold that character outside of that one show on Dynamite or that 2 hours on Monday Night Raw, whatever the case is, it's much more difficult nowadays.
Right. Now, I bring this up because, we saw over the weekend this argument with Pat McAfee and Adam Cole. Mm-hmm. And this could have been a way, like, for something relatable to happen, whether it's a shoot or a work. Like, people were asking the question, is this a shoot or this is a work? That, I think, is what we need to kind of go into with the way you portray stories in professional wrestling, where you have to get people guessing, is this a shoot or is this a work? Not necessarily, oh, here's the storyline, here's how it progresses, and go from there. And obviously, they may have dropped the ball with Adam Cole apologizing on social media for his actions, but, over the weekend, they're talking about it. And then you have on Dynamite this week, MJF is going to have a state of the industry. Now, obviously, goes along with his character, but is he going to be shooting or is he going to be working? And the reason I bring this up is Matt Hardy right now, you see that character and you're like, all right, that's a work. We know it. Mm-hmm. Real Matthew Hardy, is he going to be shooting with his promos where you get yourself thinking, okay, is this a work? Is this a shoot? Is this a shoot work? And that might be more captivating in today's audience that, you might not do in the early 90s with these cartoon characters, so to speak.
Well, I feel like anytime you can blur the lines between what's a work and what's a shoot and what's real and what's fake or scripted, it always makes for the best entertainment and always makes for the best interaction because people can get into that. All over social media, I think one of the biggest things that people were talking about was the interaction between Adam Cole and Pat McAfee. Leave it to WWE to ultimately just screw it up as usual because, like you pointed out, they had Adam Cole go out there or go onto Twitter and pretty much rescind everything he said and apologize to Pat McAfee. If you're Adam Cole and you have the type of personality and you're a strong personality like he is, especially somebody who's supposed to be one of the top guys in NXT, why are you having him go out there and apologize? Like, why are you not going, full court press with that, or really trying to exploit the fact that, oh my God, we actually got some type of attention. Let's run with this. Like,
right.
let's let Adam Cole go out there and use this as material or back up what he's saying. But to have him more or less apologize, to me, is just like, okay, you took 2 steps backward or 2 steps forward rather than 5 steps backward.
Right. Now, I was listening to a podcast and they were asking about the Adam Cole, Pat McAfee situation. And they were talking about how they made a comparison to the Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler storyline in the 80s, which that obviously blurred the lines of what's real and what's a work. And obviously it was easier in the 80s because of the lack of technology that we have today. But that's kind of where they could have gone with this. Like, WWE could have kayfabe suspended Adam Cole, could have kayfabe sent him to anger management for the tirade that he went on. Instead, they just have him issue an apology. And I know Triple H went on Pat McAfee's show and invited him to NXT. So there could be something down the line. I don't even know what they're heading to with that. But this could be stuff that MJF talks about in his State of the Industry tomorrow, which, what exactly is that? Is it just him going to be talking about why he hasn't gotten a title shot yet, while Jungle Boy and Sonny Kiss and Warhorse got title shots and he hasn't yet, never been pinned or submitted? Or is he going to, shoot from the hip and expose some things that bother him in the wrestling industry? I think you have to do that to make the storylines better. And again, going back to Matt Hardy, that's what I want to see with real Matt Hardy, the real Matthew Hardy. I want to see him blur the lines. Not, this is obviously a work. This is obviously some character. Like, the best characters are the ones that make you think, like you said. Like, doesn't make me think, oh, it's Leonardo DiCaprio playing a character. You get invested in the character he's playing. Or, Julia Roberts or whatever actor or actresses you portray. That's got to apply to wrestling today, I think.
Absolutely. You have to convince the audience that what you're doing is worth watching and get them invested in the product. If they're not invested, whether it's for 5 minutes or 10 weeks or 10 years, if they don't care about your product, they're not going to watch. So it's your job as the talent to really draw them in and give them a reason to watch, whether that's good promos, whether that's blurring the lines between what's real and what's scripted. To me, a guy like MJF is pretty much perfect for doing something like he's going to do tomorrow night, because he is a guy that he lives his character, and I don't even know if it's a character. Maybe he is really like that in real life. You wouldn't know. A guy like Brock Lesnar, the same Brock Lesnar that you see in the WWE is probably what he's really like, or has a strong resemblance to outside of the WWE. He's a big, tough, badass dude. MJF, he's a young, arrogant, cocky guy that is a prick, whether you meet him at an autograph signing, he on Twitter, and he carries that over to Dynamite. And I think a lot of what he's going to say is going to have to do not only with what's currently going on in AEW and the fact that he hasn't gotten a title shot, but the industry as a whole. I think that's why they are using the word industry, because I got to say, I think he's going to take some shots at NXT, maybe not deliberately calling them out, but I think he's going to make certain innuendos and certain things will be said that will lead you to believe that he is specifically talking about NXT. He's already done stuff like this, talking about the demo wars, and I forget exactly what he said, but Wednesday Night Wars, and he's on the front lines. So I think he's going to talk about those types of things. I think I can expect shots taken towards NXT. I think he's going to take shots at some of the young talent there in the way that they approach matches, in the way that they wrestle, the fact that they, the flips and the dives and all of this stuff that a lot of people talk about AEW being known for, that specific style, and the fact that he chooses not to do that. I think that's the type of stuff you're going to hear from MJF. I think it's going to come across as very genuine, and I think it's going to get him some legitimate heat with the AEW fan base, which is what you want from your heels.
Exactly. I agree. And I think the lost art of professional wrestling today with a lot of people is the why in professional wrestling.
Yeah, as far as segments and blurring the lines and things of that nature, they need more segments like Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels, where Shawn Michaels super kicked Marty Jannetty and threw him through the glass window at Brutus.
No, Marty dove through. Marty dove through, and you know it.
Oh, I knew he was going to do that. I just knew he was going to. See, one's no good without the other. Anyway, no, seriously, that is what they need. They need to blur the lines a little bit better. They can be edgy and they can put content out there that is more compelling. And I'm talking more so about WWE because AEW certainly has pushed the envelope with a lot of things that they have done. Mm-hmm. And I think they're doing a good job at blurring the lines between what's scripted and what's real. But that's genuinely what I think they need to do. More segments like that you just don't see in wrestling. Well, I shouldn't say wrestling in WWE product. You don't see that executed quite as good anymore.
Right. And
no more element of surprise.
Right. And I think that's what we're about to get with the real Matthew Hardy. He's going to blur the lines. He's not going to be big money. He's not going to be version 1. He's not going to be broken. He's going to be real from the heart. Honestly, if it's like the unkillable Matt Hardy that we got in the last couple weeks in WWE, and saw a little bit when he first came to AEW when he was doing the Hardy Compound promos.
Right.
That's what I think it should be, but who knows? But let me know in the comments what you guys think of the no more broken Matt Hardy. Adam Cole and Pat McAfee, and also MJF's State of the Industry in the comments below. Don't forget to share us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPV Podcast. And for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Square